Found out I was adopted at 24 when my drunk uncle spilled the truth at Thanksgiving, tracked down my birth mom, balanced it with the parents who raised me, and realized love isn't about blood. I always knew I was different, not in a dramatic superhero origin story kind of way, but in small, quiet moments that made me wonder. Like how I didn't look like either of my parents, not even a little. My mom had bright red hair and freckles, my dad had thick black hair and dark eyes, and I was just there, a weird in-between with light brown hair and a face that didn't quite fit the family album. People would comment on it sometimes. Wow, you must take after your grandparents. And my parents would just smile and nod, changing the subject. Or how, when I was around 12, I found a birth certificate tucked inside an old box in the attic. The name on it wasn't mine. The birth date was close, but not exact. When I asked my mom about it, she barely even glanced at it before saying, "Oh, that's just a mistake from the hospital. You know how disorganized they are." At the time I bought it, hospitals seemed confusing, but still something nagged at me. I'm 24 now, and I'd long since buried those little doubts. My parents were great. They supported me through everything: breakups, school stress, my terrible decision to bleach my hair in high school. So what if I didn't quite look like them? Genetics are weird, right? Then last Thanksgiving happened. We were all sitting around the dinner table, my grandparents, a couple of aunts and uncles, my parents, and me. My uncle had a little too much wine and started rambling about old family stories. And remember, he slurred, pointing his fork at my dad, "When you two got that call about the baby? Man, I've never seen you both so nervous." The whole table went silent. I felt my stomach drop. "What baby?" I asked, my voice coming out way too steady for how fast my heart was pounding. My uncle blinked, looked at my dad, then my mom, then back at me. Your parents never told you?" "Told me what?" My dad sighed and put his fork down. My mom covered her face with her hands like she was bracing for an earthquake. "And that's when they told me. I was adopted. They wanted to tell me when I was younger, but never found the right time. Then the years passed, and the longer they waited, the harder it got. It wasn't some dramatic story. I wasn't secretly royalty or stolen from a hospital or anything like that. My birth parents were young and not ready, and my parents had been waiting for a child. Simple as that. But it didn't feel simple. I sat there, staring at them, feeling like the floor had been ripped out from under me. Everything suddenly made sense: the weird comments, the vague answers, the way I'd always felt just a little out of place but never understood why. I wanted to be angry. I think part of me was, but mostly I just felt lost. After dinner, my mom sat with me in the living room, holding my hand even though I was way too old for that. "We never wanted you to feel different," she said, eyes full of tears. "You're ours, no matter what." I nodded, but it took a while for that to sink in. It's been a few months since then. I'm still figuring things out. I haven't reached out to my birth parents yet. I don't know if I will. But one thing I do know, my parents, the ones who raised me, the ones who sat through every awful school play and cheered me on at every soccer game, are my real parents. And honestly, I think that's all that matters. In the days after the big reveal, I felt like I was living in a weird haze. Nothing had changed, but everything had changed. I looked at my parents differently, not in a bad way, just differently. Every memory of my childhood suddenly had this extra layer I hadn't known was there. The way my mom always teared up at those adoption stories and movies. The way my dad always overcompensated at Father-Son Day events at school, making sure I knew he was all in on this dad thing. Had I been blind this whole time? The hardest part was that I didn't know what I was supposed to feel. Was I supposed to be mad at them? Grateful? Sad? I bounced between all three, sometimes in the same hour. One night, about a week later, my dad knocked on my bedroom door. He was holding 2 beers. He never did that. My parents weren't strict about drinking, but they weren't the have a casual beer with your son type either. "Mind if I sit?" he asked. I shrugged. "Yeah, sure." He handed me a bottle and sat on the edge of my bed. For a second, we just sat there in silence, both of us taking awkward sips. Finally, he exhaled, rubbing his hand over his face. "I don't know what to say to make this easier," he admitted. "Yeah," I said. "Me neither." He nodded like that made sense. Then he pulled something out of his jacket pocket and handed it to me. A folded-up envelope, yellowed at the edges. "What's this?" I asked. Something we always kept, just in case you ever wanted to know. Inside was a letter, a really old letter, written in messy, slanted handwriting. I immediately noticed the name at the bottom, Laura. My birth mom? I asked. My dad nodded. I took a deep breath and started reading. Dear little one, I don't know what kind of person you'll grow up to be, but I hope you're kind. I hope you laugh a lot. I hope you have people in your life who love you the way I wish I could. I'm not giving you away because I don't love you. I'm giving you away because I do. I want you to have the best life, and I know that means letting you go. But I hope one day, if you ever wonder about me, you'll know that I never stop thinking about you. I never will. With love, Laura. I had to read it twice before it really hit me. She wrote this before you even adopted me? I asked, my voice quieter than I meant it to be. She did. My dad said. We never met her, but the agency gave us the letter. Your mom and we decided to hold on to it, just in case you ever wanted it. I ran my thumb over the ink, the faded lines, the little smudge at the bottom where it looked like maybe she'd been crying when she wrote it. I'd spent the past week feeling like I didn't know who I was anymore, like my life had been built on a secret. But right then, holding that letter, I felt something shift. My birth mom had loved me. My adoptive parents did love me. None of this was about not being wanted. If anything, I was wanted twice. I looked over at my dad. You really thought I'd be mad at you? He shrugged. Wouldn't blame you if you were. I shook my head. I was kind of mad, but mostly I was just scared that I didn't really belong. Dad put his beer down and clapped a hand on my shoulder, squeezing tight. You belong, kid. Always have. For the first time since Thanksgiving, I actually believed it. Over the next few weeks, life slowly started to feel normal again. Or, at least, my version of normal. I went to work, met up with friends, binged Netflix like nothing had changed. But in the back of my mind, that letter sat there, nudging me. I read it so many times, I practically had it memorized. I kept wondering, where was Laura now? Did she ever think about me on my birthday? Did she wonder if I turned out okay? Would she even want to hear from me? One night, after way too many hours of overthinking, I did something I swore I wouldn't. I Googled her name and immediately hit a dead end. Turns out, searching for someone with only a first name and a 24-year-old letter is about as helpful as looking for a single sock in a laundromat. But I wasn't ready to give up just yet. So I did what any tech-savvy millennial would do. I asked my mom for help. To her credit, she didn't freak out. She didn't get defensive or worried. She just nodded, sat down at the kitchen table with me, and pulled out a small metal box I'd never seen before. Inside were old adoption papers, a few faded Polaroids, and a hospital bracelet. She wanted you to have this, my mom said, handing me a tiny slip of paper. A last name, an old address. I stared at it. This was the closest I'd ever been to her. You sure about this? Mom asked gently. No, I admitted, but I think I need to know. So I started searching again. It took some time, but eventually I found something, a woman with her name living a few states over. I hesitated for days before working up the courage to send a message. I kept it short. Hi, I know this is random, but I think you might be my birth mother. I don't want to disrupt your life, but if you're open to talking, I'd love to connect. I hit send before I could overthink it. And then, nothing. For days. Then a week. I told myself to let it go. Maybe she didn't want to be found. Maybe she had a new life, a family, a history I wasn't a part of. But just as I was ready to delete the message and move on, my phone buzzed. A new email. Subject, Rehi. I held my breath as I opened it. Dear, I don't even know how to start this. Yes, it's me. And I have been waiting 24 years for this message. I don't think I breathed for a full minute. She wanted to talk. She wanted to know me. For the first time since this whole thing started, I felt something new, excitement. I had no idea what would come next, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't lost. I wasn't unwanted. I was just getting started. The night before our first call, I barely slept. I kept running through all the things I wanted to say. Would she remember what time I was born? Did she ever wonder if I looked like her? What if she regretted giving me up? What if she didn't? By the time I finally worked up the nerve to dial her number, my hands were shaking. The phone rang twice before I heard a soft click. And then her voice. Hello. She sounded normal. Not dramatic. Not emotional. Just a regular person answering the phone. I swallowed hard. It's me, I guess. I don't know if I should say my name or... She let out a breathy laugh. I know who you are. Silence stretched for a second, and then she said the last thing I expected. I can't believe this is real. Yeah, I said, exhaling. Me neither. And just like that, we started talking. At first, it was awkward. Neither of us knew where to start. But then little by little, it got easier. She told me she was 19 when she had me. She had no support, no money, no clue what she was doing. I knew I couldn't be what you needed, she admitted. But I never stopped wondering who you became. I told her about my life, about my parents, about how I had the best and sometimes most embarrassing childhood. I told her about my job, my hobbies, the dumb things I did in high school. And she listened, really listened. At some point, I asked the thing I'd been too afraid to ask. Do you regret it? She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, never. Not once. I missed you. But I never regretted making sure you had a good life. I don't know why, but hearing that made something in my chest unclench. We talked for 2 hours that night. And when we finally said goodbye, she hesitated before asking, would you ever want to meet? I don't think I even paused. Yeah, I said. I think I really, really do. 3 weeks later, I got on a plane. I told my parents everything. They were nervous but supportive, my mom slipping snacks into my bag like I was 10 again. Just in case you get hungry, she said. When I landed, my heart felt like it was trying to escape my ribcage. And then I saw her. She was standing near baggage claim, hands gripping the strap of her purse like she wasn't sure whether to wave or run. She looked like me, not in a weird, dramatic way, but in the kind of way that made me realize I'd never looked like anyone before. I walked up to her, and before I could even say anything, she laughed, this nervous, relieved laugh, and said, God, you're taller than I expected. And just like that, I laughed too. I don't know what I thought that first moment would feel like. Some big, cinematic slow-motion hug? Some emotional breakdown? Instead, it felt like seeing someone I'd always known, but just hadn't met yet. We spent the whole weekend together. She showed me old pictures. Her at 19, wide-eyed and too young. A grainy ultrasound picture of me. We ate at her favorite diner, talked about the weirdest things. She had my laugh. I had her habit of tapping my fingers against the table when I was thinking. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't some fairy tale reunion. But it was real. On the last day, as I was getting ready to leave, she hugged me. A real, tight, I don't want to let go kind of hug. I'm so proud of you, she whispered. And just like that, I knew I'd never have to wonder again. On the flight home, I stared out the window, replaying every moment in my head. It still didn't feel real. I had spent 24 years wondering about this woman, imagining her as some distant mystery. And now she was just a person who laughed too loud at dumb jokes, a person who ordered extra whipped cream on her coffee, a person who, despite everything, had loved me from a distance my whole life. And now I got to love her back. When I landed, my parents were waiting for me. My mom, being my mom, immediately started fussing, brushing imaginary lint off my jacket and asking if I ate enough. My dad just clapped a hand on my shoulder and said, well, and suddenly I didn't feel nervous anymore. She's great, I said. She's really great. I watched as my mom's shoulders relaxed, like she'd been holding her breath for days. My dad gave me a nod, the kind that meant I'm happy for you without needing to say it. That night, sitting at the kitchen table with them, I realized something. I didn't have to choose. Loving my birth mom didn't mean I loved them any less. My life wasn't some puzzle where only one piece could fit. It was all real. All of it. A few days later, I got a text from Laura. Hey, I know this might be weird, but would you want to come back for Thanksgiving? No pressure. Just thought I'd ask. I stared at my phone, my heart doing that weird, excited but also terrified thing. I had spent my whole life sitting at the same Thanksgiving table, eating the same food, surrounded by the same family. But now, there was more family out there. A whole new set of people I didn't even know yet. I thought about it for a while. Then I texted back. Yeah, I think I'd really like that. I had no idea what the future looked like. But for the first time, I wasn't afraid of it. Thanksgiving at Laura's house was surreal. For 24 years, my holidays had been predictable. My dad would spend half the day wrestling with the turkey while my mom shouted instructions from the other room. My uncle would get too drunk. My aunt would judge everyone's life choices. And at some point, someone would start a heated debate over pie flavors. It was our chaos. Familiar. Comfortable. But this was stepping into an entirely different world. Laura lived in a small but cozy house in a quiet town. When I pulled up, I sat in my car for a full minute, gripping the steering wheel like an idiot. What if this was too much? What if I didn't belong here? Then the front door flew open, and there she was, standing on the porch, waving like she'd been waiting all day. I got out, barely making it up the walkway, before she pulled me into a hug. "You came," she said, her voice thick with something between relief and excitement. "I did," I said, hugging her back. "Hope you made extra food. I eat like a linebacker." She laughed. "Oh, trust me, you're covered." Inside, the house smelled amazing, like butter and cinnamon and something roasting in the oven. There were people everywhere, a mix of laughter and clinking dishes filling the space. "Everyone, this is..." Laura paused like she wasn't sure what to call me. "Her son? Her long-lost kid?" I decided to save her. "I'm Ben," I said, giving a small wave. "And I have no idea what to do with my hands." That broke the ice. Almost immediately, people started introducing themselves. There was Laura's sister, who gave me the world's tightest hug and muttered "it's about time" under her breath. There were cousins, an uncle, a grandma who looked at me like I was a missing puzzle piece. And then there was Matt, her husband, the guy who had been in her life for the past 15 years, who knew of me, but had never expected to actually meet me. I wasn't sure what to expect. Awkwardness? A weird competitive energy? But Matt just shook my hand firmly and said, "I'm really glad you're here." And I believed him. Dinner was chaos in the best way. There was so much food, I was convinced they'd been cooking for an army. Everyone talked over each other, laughing, sharing stories, making me feel like I had been there 100 times before. Laura kept sneaking glances at me like she couldn't quite believe I was real. At one point, she reached over and squeezed my hand under the table. "Thank you," she whispered. I didn't say anything. I just squeezed back. After dinner, we moved to the living room. Someone put on music, a cousin pulled out an old photo album, and before I knew it, I was sitting on the couch, flipping through pictures of Laura when she was my age. "You were such a teenager," I teased, pointing at a picture of her in oversized flannel, holding a Walkman. She rolled her eyes. It was the 90s. We all looked ridiculous. I turned the page, and my breath caught. There was a picture of her, young and tired, sitting in a hospital bed. She was holding a tiny bundle wrapped in a blue blanket. Me. I stared at it, feeling something tighten in my chest. Laura cleared her throat. "They let me hold you for a little while before everything. I memorized your face. I didn't want to forget." I looked at her. "You didn't?" She shook her head. "Not for a second." I swallowed hard. "Can I?" I motioned to the photo. She smiled. "It's yours." I traced my finger over the edges before tucking it into my pocket. At the end of the night, as I was leaving, Laura stood at the door, her arms wrapped around herself. "You don't have to say yes," she said, "but would it be okay if I called you sometimes? Just to check in?" I pretended to think about it, just to mess with her. Then I grinned. "Yeah, I'd like that." Her eyes welled up, but she nodded. I got in my car, started the engine, and glanced in the rearview mirror. She was still standing there, watching me go. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was driving away from something. I was driving towards something, and I couldn't wait to see where it led. The calls became a regular thing. At first, they were short. A quick check-in, a "Hey, how's your week going?" kind of thing. But over time, they stretched longer. Laura would call to tell me about a ridiculous customer she dealt with at work. I'd call to vent about a stressful deadline. We swapped dumb stories, shared inside jokes, learned the little things about each other that most people take for granted. She told me that I hum when I eat, just like she does. I told her she snorts when she laughs, and she groaned, saying, "Oh great, now I'm never going to unhear that." And just like that, we were something, not mother and son, not exactly, not in the way I knew it with my mom, the one who raised me, but something real, something good. Speaking of my parents, things with them stayed solid. I think part of me had worried, deep down, that they'd feel replaced. But they didn't. If anything, it made us closer. One night, I was having dinner with them, and my dad casually said, "So, how's Laura?" It took me a second to realize he was asking, because he genuinely wanted to know. "She's good," I said, smiling. "She's taking a pottery class. Apparently, she sucks at it." My mom laughed. "Well, tell her I said good luck." And that was that. No Whitneys. No Yelisi. Just family. One day, about 6 months after Thanksgiving, Laura called me. "I was thinking," she said, "if you're up for it, maybe you could come visit in the summer. Stay for a few days. No pressure." I hesitated. Not because I didn't want to, but because it was big. A holiday was one thing. But this was stepping into her life, meeting her friends, maybe even staying in her home. It was a level of closeness I hadn't fully prepared for. But when I imagined saying no, I didn't like how that felt. So I took a deep breath and said, "Yeah, I think I'd really love that." And just like that, it became real. A few months later, I found myself standing on Laura's doorstep again, this time with a duffel bag slung over my shoulder. She opened the door, grinning. "You actually came," she teased. "I did," I said. "Hope you stocked up on snacks. I still eat like a linebacker." She laughed and pulled me inside. And that's when I knew this wasn't temporary. This wasn't a one-time reunion, a fleeting moment of closure. This was something that was going to last. Because family isn't just about where you come from. It's about who you choose to hold on to. And I wasn't letting go.